Hey everyone, glad you're here. Did you know the United States just paid nearly $61 billion in interest on the national debt in a single month, while collecting less than half of that from tariffs? That's a crazy contrast, and it's shaping one of the biggest money debates going on right now. President Trump's team is looking closely at tariffs, not just as a trade tool, but also as a possible way to fund rebate checks for Americans. And the big question is this: should that money go directly into the pockets of families, or should it be used to chip away at the nation's $37 trillion debt? This is not some abstract policy debate. It touches everyone, from families struggling with bills to retirees watching inflation eat into their savings. Stick around, because what we're about to unpack could help you see both sides of this fight and what it really means for your wallet. Now, before we dive too far, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If the government collected an extra $300 billion from tariffs, would you rather see it handed out in rebate checks or put toward paying off the debt? There's no right or wrong answer, but your perspective matters, and I always enjoy reading where people stand on these tough issues. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future updates on stories like this. Alright, so let's start with the basics. Tariffs are basically taxes placed on imported goods. Under Trump's trade plan, tariffs have been expanded again. That means everything from industrial parts to everyday consumer products gets taxed when it enters the country. The goal behind this is twofold. First, to encourage companies to produce more goods here at home. And second, to bring in revenue for the government. Since April, the Treasury says the U.S. has already collected over $100 billion from tariffs, and they expect that number could climb to $300 billion this year. That's a serious amount of money. But here's the catch. Just 1 month of interest payments on the national debt already costs over $60 billion. So even though tariffs sound huge, compared to our debt, it's like throwing a glass of water into the ocean. And this is where the debate gets heated. Senator Josh Hawley has introduced a bill called the American Worker Rebate Act. His idea is straightforward. Take the tariff money and send it back to Americans as rebate checks. It would look a lot like the stimulus payments from the pandemic. We're talking about checks of $600 per person, including dependents, so a family of 4 could get $2,400. For many households, that's groceries, rent, or catching up on bills. Hawley frames it as a kind of fairness, saying Americans deserve a slice of the money being collected from foreign companies. On paper, that sounds appealing. Who doesn't want a check showing up in the mailbox? But here's where things split. Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said the priority right now is not cutting rebate checks. He's more focused on using that money to pay down debt. He even said checks might be possible later, but not right now. And that shows the divide. Lawmakers like Hawley pushing for immediate relief, while debt-conscious officials argue the smarter move is to fix the balance sheet. Let's think about what this means in practical terms. Our national debt has climbed to $37 trillion. That's not just a number, it's a weight on the entire economy. Interest payments alone are exploding because the Federal Reserve raised rates to fight inflation. Those payments are now in the same league as defense spending or Medicaid. That means more and more taxpayer money is going toward interest, not schools, not infrastructure, not healthcare. So if tariffs only bring in a few $100 billion compared to trillions owed, even a big haul doesn't make much of a dent. That's why some economists say giving out rebate checks might feel good now, but does nothing to solve the deeper problem. And in fact, it could even make things harder by fueling inflation. Think about it. Tariffs often raise prices on consumers, since companies pass the costs down the line. So the government collects more money from tariffs, but then hands out checks while prices remain higher anyway. In a way, it's like taking money out of your left pocket and putting it back in your right pocket. And let's not forget sustainability. Tariff revenue isn't steady. The higher tariffs go, the more imports might shrink. And if imports shrink, revenue falls. That makes it unreliable for either debt reduction or permanent rebate checks. It's a moving target. Inside the Republican Party, there's a split too. Some lawmakers see the rebate idea as smart politics but bad economics. Senator Rand Paul even called it the dumbest idea he'd heard. Others, like Senator Ron Johnson, said they'd only support rebate checks if the country had a budget surplus, which we clearly don't. Trump himself has hinted at the idea of dividend-style payments for Americans, but his officials are careful to say it's only a possibility for the future. So right now, Americans are unlikely to see a tariff rebate check anytime soon. The administration is focused, at least publicly, on debt reduction. But that doesn't mean the conversation isn't valuable, because it forces us to face tough choices. Do we prioritize short-term relief, or do we buckle down for long-term stability? It's kind of like this. Imagine you're carrying a massive credit card balance, and suddenly you get a bonus at work. Do you take your family on a nice vacation, or do you pay down the card? Both choices have pros and cons. One gives you immediate joy, the other saves you from bigger trouble later. That's the trade-off America faces right now with this tariff revenue. And let's be honest, for families who are barely scraping by, the idea of a $600 check is powerful. It's rent, it's medical bills, it's putting food on the table. But on the other hand, every dollar spent on checks is a dollar not spent reducing the debt that will eventually demand higher taxes or fewer government services. So where does this leave us? For now, it looks like the rebate checks won't happen in the near future, at least not under current policy. The administration wants to focus on the debt, but the fact that this debate is even happening tells you just how strained the system has become. Tariffs are being sold as a kind of silver bullet, extra money from foreign imports, but in practice, Americans still feel the pinch. Higher costs, slower growth, and no clear solution. And maybe that's the real point here. Whether the money goes to checks or debt, the bigger challenge is fixing the underlying imbalance. Because as long as the US runs massive deficits, we'll always be stuck choosing between band-aids and tough medicine. So what do you think? Should the government focus on cutting rebate checks to help families today, or is it wiser to chip away at the debt for the long term? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to see where everyone lands on this. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future updates on money, policy, and how all of it could impact your savings and your future. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.